Hello and welcome to the bonsai garden. So here we are by the pond. So here's my Japanese maple butterfly grove, and I'm always quite pleased with this. It does have this lovely colour this time of year. The only thing to say about this perhaps is that although I repotted it into this pot I think about 2 years ago, I haven't done any root work with it, and I can see that it seems to be rising up more out of the pot, so that suggests to me that there's been quite a lot of root growth underneath. So come spring I will be sort of tilting that out of the pot and trimming back the roots there. That then should also reinvigorate the tree and hopefully give us some more ramification on there. Immediately next to that is Cotoneaster, which is one of the very first bonsai trees that I had. It's never really done anything. It might benefit from going into a basket to help sort of aerate the roots and thicken it up a bit. It's a bit of a non-entity, nondescript tree at the moment, so it might be that it just simply doesn't make the grade, or it might be that I need to rethink how I'm growing that, how I'm styling it, and what I'm actually going to do with it going forward. Here's the Chinese elm which I picked up on our more recent holiday from Batsford Arboretum. There's not really a lot to say about that. It's perhaps a little bit dense at the moment. Probably needs some branch selection doing on there just to thin it out a bit. No great hurry. Immediately next to that is my Beni Maiko Japanese Maple, and you can see it being that time of year, the leaves are beginning to fall on it. Now, Beni Maiko is a Japanese maple which does tend to have vivid sort of pink red colour to it when the leaves emerge, and in that sense it's very close to a Deshojo maple. Just to the side of that here we've got an ornamental cherry tree in a Tim Butterworth pot. Haven't really done much with this year. It has still got the leaves on it, and all I'll probably do with that next year is when the first flush of leaves come out, just remove those, and the second flush will be much smaller. Hopefully encourage some ramification on there as well, so that you get more branching on it. It's just a bit of a corkscrew, typical S shape sort of bend at the moment, and it needs more branching. Another one of my garden azaleas from the garden centre here. This is one of those which I initially got a pot which had about 5 plants in it and separated them all out, which is where the other azaleas that you've seen came from, with the exception of the Greeneood Bonsai azalea that I have. See that the leaves do go a really deep red colour, and in the centre there we've got where the buds are developing for next year. Just to the side here we've got my large European larch. I think it's a European larch, it could be a Japanese larch. If you know the difference, then please let me know, have your thoughts in the comments. And you can just see that the needles on there are beginning to brown off and go sort of orangey colour on the tips. And what I would expect is that this will go a bright orange, sort of golden colour before they all fall. It looks like that's fairly imminent. This is the tree which I call Wavy Davy, because to me it always makes me think of those big inflatable men that you see in car sales lots. You know, the sort of thing, big tall inflatable just sort of waving about in the wind. And this is probably my third bonsai tree. It's never really done anything. It's been quite neglected by myself. I just put some really thick wire on the trunk initially just to give it that shape to the trunk. Wired down the branches and haven't really done anything with it since. So again, it might be one of those where it hasn't made the grade. I might need to make a decision about that. Perhaps I could give it away to somebody in the comments who might be interested. We'll see. So my variegated juniper, I recently trimmed this back quite severely. It's a bit leggy. It's got sort of sparse long growth. So by trimming some of that out, cutting back, I'm hoping to promote some back budding and try and encourage that to be a bit more denser in the canopy. So we'll see how that goes next year. And just behind that we've got a Palmeter Mugo Pine, and this looks to me like it will grow very much like a black pine, Japanese black pine. So I can use this as a relatively cheap plan to sort of try out the techniques which I might be using on the Japanese black pine. So we'll see how that goes forward. I am intending on keeping this as quite a small tree, so I don't envisage that growing significantly. I do believe that the Palmeter is a small Mugo Pine anyway, so it might be possible that that just goes straight into a pot in spring. This is a Katsura garden tree, Japanese maple, and this is more the sort of colour that I would expect to see in a Katsura. They tend to open in spring with a sort of buttery yellow colour with a sort of hint of green, sort of the colour of the tips of the leaves there. They go green through spring and summer, and then they take on a more orangey colour in autumn. I think perhaps because of the dry, warm weather and strong sunlight this year, that has affected the coloration on them. And in particular, the smaller bonsai Katsura that I have is a really dazzling, vivid red. And this is that Katsura bonsai tree, developed from an £8 plant bought from the local DIY store B&Q. And once those leaves drop, I will be taking a look at the structure of the branching, placing those, doing a bit of wiring, and deciding how to take that tree forward. But I am quite pleased. This was grown in a basket for 2 years, and that gave me this nice Nabari root flare, and I think growing it in the shallow pot will help encourage that. Another one of my early bonsai efforts here. It's a variegated Cotoneaster, and as ever, the fact that it's a variegated leaf means that it's a slow grower, and it's a bit nondescript really. To me, in fact, it looks like a pair of frog's legs with the feet kicking up in the air. And I've struggled to get more denser canopy and foliage on that because it's such a slow grower, but we'll see. I think it looks better in this pot that it's in rather than the pot that it was in previously. This plant here is the Deshojo Japanese maple tree, which I bought from a garden centre in the Lake District, and it initially had the sort of goblet shape where it was going to get inverse taper at a point where there were 5 or 6 branches all coming out the same, like a goblet shape. So I took the risk of trimming all of those back and then put it into a basket to grow. But unfortunately, when I was developing the Japanese tea house, a plank of wood from that fell across the basket and decapitated the tree, which is a shame because it was at a point where it was beginning to look credible, and I could take that out of the basket and maybe put it into a training pot. Unfortunately, all I was left with was quite a thick trunk with 2 branches sticking out of that at 90 degrees, and it was just totally missing the top of the tree. I tried trimming it back in the hope that it would put out some new buds, but it didn't do. So what I've ended up doing is burying the thick trunk into the soil here, which is why it's in quite a deep pot, and effectively ground layering this tree. So ground layering is just trying to get the tree to put out roots further up the trunk than they were, and then I can remove the lower part. So the thick trunk that I had developed is actually under the soil here, and I'm growing roots, and effectively that thick trunk is now useless, but I have managed to rescue the upper part of the tree, which is putting out lots and lots of branches here. So at least the tree has a future where otherwise it might not have done. Next to that here is I think a field maple, which has just sat on the wall there, a bit neglected. It's a tree which I bought as part of a bundle of trees from the Woodkand Trust, which is a British charity who sell and promote trees. They do on their website have lots of seedlings of British natural trees and try and promote people growing those. So it's a nice source of getting some cheap trees, which are they're seedlings in a little plug. That particular tree is perhaps 3 years old at this stage. Just here is my other Deshojo. This is the Greeneood Bonsai, twisted Deshojo, and you can see that the leaves are just beginning to take on their autumn colour. It's slower, or it's some way behind my larger Deshojo, which I'll show you shortly. And that's planted up in a Tim Butterworth pot. The larch next to it here is the larch tree which I bought from the recent bonsai show at Markham Green in Doncaster. Now, quite unusually, this is in a rectangular pot, and it's probably the only one of my trees which is in a rectangular pot. Now it's got wiring on the branches, and I have sort of added some more subtle bends into that. And you can see here the needles, the leaves are beginning to take on their autumn colour, and I'm expecting all my larches will go this golden yellow colour and be a sort of blaze before those drop. This tree, if I just look underneath, has got a series of interesting roots which are part of what attracted me to it, but there are a couple around the back which were sort of sitting a bit proud of the soil. So what I had to do was make a couple of wire staples, and you might just be able to see in here. I've had to pin those to the soil there to try and hold them closer down. There's a couple of Cotoneasters at the back there. See, that one's got a lovely little red berry on it. It's related, I believe, to both the rose and the apple family, Cotoneaster, which is why these look like tiny little apples. Cotoneaster, it's a lovely plant for bonsai. It's evergreen, although the leaves take on an orangey colour in autumn. So you've got green leaves in spring and summer. You've got the berries developing, little speckled white flowers in spring, and then come autumn and winter they have their bright red berries on them, which look lovely. Another one of my larch trees. This again potentially is another one of those trees that went into a pot too early, and so may have a trunk that's more spindly, but I think it's developing quite nicely. I did put some wire on this and gave some nice curves in some of the branches, so you can see the sort of twisting of the branches there and the one underneath it. And larches are really nice trees to work on. They're really easy and predictable. This is the Chinese juniper, my little ram's horn juniper here. I just recently did a video where I was working on that and trying to separate out the pads a bit. And just need lots of feed next year, just to help develop the density again. It might need something doing with the crown up here. Some of these branches bringing round, maybe, just to sort of fill in this space at the top. This is the Project Juniper from Greeneood Bonsai. Quite happy with that. We've got here the Trident Maple, which I got from the Doncaster show at Markham Grange. And Alex Braunton had initially bought this tree, and I was speaking to him and saw that he had it. And I didn't have any Trident Maple in my collection, so I was asking where he got it from. As it turned out, there was another tree which he'd seen, which he didn't quite have enough money for, so he offered to sell me this one. Now, I don't know how much money he made on it, whether he just literally sold it to me for what he bought it for, or whether I was a mug and he made a massive profit from it. Anyway, it's massively heavy with this big rock in the pot, and I'm just really looking to make that and encourage that to grow into the gap in the rock. This is my other root over rock tree, my lovely Chinese elm. This is the one that I say looks like a face hugger from the film Alien. I'm sure if you've seen those films, you know what I mean. And it's just a really nice, vigorous, healthy tree. It's a cork bark elm, so it's got that sort of crusty looking, corky bark to it. and it's a nice vigorous tree. It's got really quite dense canopy, typical sort of Chinese elm really. Lovely nice little leaves, and it's a very nice little tree. It's one of my favourite trees. This is the larger of my Buddhist pines, and this one came from the Japanese garden at Morgan near Newquay, and I haven't done anything with this. It's been quite a slow grower, and I haven't repotted it since owning it for perhaps about 2.5 years now. As with the smaller one, this has lived outside in all weathers. Some people say that it's an indoor tree, but I've found that it's quite tolerant of the British winters, and certainly in the garden here I've not had any problems with it. You can see there has been lots of fresh growth on it. You can see where the tips are a lighter colour than the older foliage, and it's perhaps getting to a point now where I might need to wire some of this down to extend out the branches. It is a sort of literati style with just a tall slender trunk and then the branches coming off on either side. I can review that in spring and see what's happening with it. Got a Chinese holly. Again, the Chinese holly, it's a little bit nondescript, and I haven't done anything with this. I've just left it. It's been a bit neglected, so come spring I need to think about what I'm doing with that. Try and organise it and give it a bit more shape, really. This is my dawn redwood, and you can see that the leaves here are beginning to brown off, look a bit dry in places. I think in the latter part of summer this started looking a bit dry. I keep it on this drip tray to increase the humidity for the tree. Now what I would normally expect is that these leaves will go a bright orange, gold orange colour before falling, and this seems to have skipped that bit and it's just going to losing the leaves. So I think that is more of a colour that I would expect to see the leaves before they drop in autumn. At the back there is my Loropetalum or Chinese fringe tree. It has quite delicate branches that are probably quite brittle and easily broken, and I haven't done anything with this year. You can see they have this really lovely sort of spidery pink flower on them, and I believe they tend to keep the leaves through winter as well. Just looking, this one seems like something's been having a little bit of a nibble at it. Maybe some kind of caterpillar or something in there. So I may need to just have a go at that with some insecticide or some kind of wash just to deter the insects. One of my Alberta spruce, and just looking there, it looks to me like the wire is beginning to bite into the trunk. I have a bit of a love-hate with Alberta spruce. It's quite a flexible tree, and it's one of those when you put the wire on it, you think that it's set into place, and then you take the wire off, and the next day the tree's gone back to the original position. It doesn't have a lot of muscle memory, if you like, in the tree. It sort of reverts back to its initial shape quite easily. It's quite irritating in that sense. But it looks like this one is overdue me removing the wire, so I'm just going to take that one off the benches and put it on my table ready for me to work on. Just hidden away in the shade of the other trees here is another one of the Norway maple or sycamore. I defoliated this in perhaps August time, and it hasn't put out any more leaves, but it does have a couple of buds on the end there. So I think it's just a case of leaving that until spring. In front of that I've got my Magnolia stellata. You can see it has quite large leaves. It might be one of those trees that ends up not being 100% suitable for bonsai, just really because of the size of the leaves. I believe it also has quite large flowers on it. I'm expecting white petals, which is why I put it into the white pot. Behind that is my silver birch forest, and you can see all the dried husks of catkins on there. So those would have had the seeds in, which are transferred by the wind. And you can see that the leaves are taking on that sort of buttery yellow colour before falling. Now this forest is the one which has a tree which died in here due to wire constricting it. So in spring I need to take that out, and I've got another tree which I'm going to put into that space. And it should be a bit of a challenge to take out of the pot because it's quite large. So in all probability what I'll do is just cut a wedge out of there and replace the new tree into that area before filling it in. This is my other cork bark elm, another one of my favourite trees, and doesn't need a lot doing to it. It's quite a vigorous growing tree. It has quite a dense canopy that just needs thinning out, and through winter it will just be left to its own devices. I believe last year it did actually keep the foliage through winter, and there's no reason why it wouldn't do that again this year. With my Chinese elms it's been 50-50. Some have kept the foliage, others have lost it. I think it's just down to the genetics of the individual tree. This is a Kojo no Mai Fuji cherry tree, which I've grown as a wind-swept style, and I've had this tree for about 3 years. I'm struggling a little bit with the ramification and increasing the twigginess on the tree. But you can see there's a profusion of buds on there. So fingers crossed, come spring we get quite a lot of development on there. We'll see. Just behind that, there's another one of my Picea Alberta spruce trees, and you can see this is one that I recently unwired, and it has kept some of the shape. Now initially this was a straight up and down typical sort of Christmas tree shape, and because I find that these are a bit awkward to wire, what I did was I actually put like a guy wire over the top, so that as the tree grew, tension would pull the top of the tree down, which is how I've got these sort of sharp bends into the trunk there. So that's a technique which might be useful for these types of trees. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your experience of these are. This is my Paul's Scarlet Hawthorn tree. Now, if you've seen earlier videos, you might have seen that there was a continuation and a bit more growth above the tree here. And I've been air layering that for about 2 years, and it's been quite frustrating and slow. Now, about 3 weeks ago, I noticed that there were roots in the moss, and I separated the upper part of the tree, which I'll show you in a minute. I also took the lower part of the tree out of the horrible big blue Chinese ceramic pot it was in, and I put it into this basket just to thicken it up, try and encourage the roots a bit more. So we'll see how that goes in spring. It's a bit of an awkward shape at the moment, but I can develop that. After all, bonsai is a marathon, not a sprint, eh? There's another one of my larches. This is my Hornbeam forest, which I call Hornbeam Hill because it's got quite a hump in the middle there, and you can see that's taking on autumn coloration, the leaves browning off and falling. So it depends which particular tree. So it seems the ones at this end are dry already, and as I move across, goes increasingly from yellow to more green, but obviously over time the whole thing will look that colour and the leaves will fall.